I don't know. It's like you deciding that you're going to overeat and then you become obese, and then you kind of have to lose weight, or you're being told that like you have some shit like high blood pressure, and then you come back and you're like, you know what, me overeating is something that happened to me, and as much as I felt bad about it, it was the challenge that prepared me for.
The royal penis is clean, Your Highness.
Welcome to the Breaktime Podcast, where I talk about love, sex, and relationships from a guy's perspective, as well as a bunch of other guy shit. The man on the mic is a man whose sickness for the thickness prevents him from skinny dipping. He is also a man who once believed that bukkake was a Japanese form of martial arts. It is none other than your tall, dark, and mildly handsome man, Sir Denver B. I am here with question and answer. Question that I intend to answer, but answer that is not related to said question, but to something that people never really asked for. But for some reason, that's like the most important part of this episode for some reason. And, it seems particularly relevant. It seems a little bit, weird, but all in all, I do intend on breaking it down and explaining it and showing the reason why I have decided to discuss what I am going to discuss. But first of all, if you have listened so far, thank you so much for listening. I hope you listen all the way till the end. And should you like it, should you dislike this episode, plus many others, or if you want to give feedback, then on IG it is at the Breaktime_podcast, on Facebook it is at the Breaktime Podcast, and on X it is at Bagaka the D. The DMs are always open, and I would be more than happy to attend to them personally and handle them accordingly. Oh yeah, also I even forgot the Bluesky one, because apparently not everyone is on Bluesky. Also, I want followers. So, if you could reach out on Bluesky at thebreaktimepod.bsky.social and follow me from there, I'd appreciate that immensely. It would feel really nice to know that I have followers, and like I can continue posting up shit because it's also another social media app. But all in all, thank you so much for listening, and I hope you listen all the way till the end, like I said. And I probably should be getting into things pretty quickly because I don't know if I'm gonna have enough time. I don't know if this is gonna be a long one or a short one. All I do know is I'm gonna start explaining and then I'm gonna finish off ranting, which seems like the opposite of how I normally do shit, but you know what? Sometimes you have to play opposite games every so often. And to kick things off, I want to start by discussing a question that was brought up by a woman on IG known as Alma, or Alma Royce. She was busy asking about men and why they would much rather do one thing instead of just get married because both seem so similar. And then for me to answer it, I first need to let her ask the question, then I can give a pretty good breakdown. So without further ado...
Okay, let's be honest. Why is it easier for guys to say, let's move in together, than saying, let's get married? Are you afraid of marriage? Is that why? What exactly?
Okay, I don't think the term that should be used is afraid of marriage, but well, the long and short of it is, it's just easier to do that. But anyways, let me try and give a more comprehensive answer so that, I can fill in a bunch of time and shit. Now, when it comes down to it, the reason behind us choosing not to marry the babe and instead to just ask her to move in, considering that there are some people that do that and never really get married, they choose to cohabit, as well as other people that will do that then get married, is mainly just because it's easier to get a babe to do that. Like, you kind of think about it. When you think of the idea of getting married, there is so much weight on that decision. There is so much weight and responsibility that comes with that decision. By the time us guys choose to do it, not unless if we do not have any understanding on the weight of it, there's usually going to be quite some time that you actually sit down and you think about it and you're like, you know what, I am willing to do this. Because the reality of it is marriage essentially is going to bring two families together so that you can create another family, and hopefully you guys are gonna agree, and on top of that you guys are going to do it in front of a bunch of other people, and you will announce your vows in front of a bunch of other people, not unless you're doing like the whole AG thing and you're just going to the government and you're asking them to give you a certificate. Like, for the most part, there's a lot of people involved when it comes to a marriage, and that's just the wedding itself. Then now you also have the bit where you are not only socially bound, or at least you have social consequences if it doesn't work out, there's also legal ramifications if you don't work out. And they are so big, or at least the decision itself is so big, that it has an entire section in the Constitution, and that section is referred to as the Marriage Act. And last I checked, we've never had a moving in act. We've never had any legal sort of ramifications if you kick out the person that had moved in with you, or if you move out of the house that, you and the person who had moved in with you were in. If stuff doesn't work out, there is no legal ramifications. Even socially, it's not that big of a deal. Like, at the end of it, usually, if you get the babe to move in with you, if stuff doesn't work out, she can just move out. It's pretty simple. There's not that much legal ramifications to it. There's not that much responsibility. And you don't even have to involve the other families in them knowing that the two of you are living together. Not unless if you guys choose to do some long-term type thing and then it becomes cohabitation, blah, blah, blah. Even then, there's not that much of a legal ramification towards that entire thing. Even on a social level, it's not that bad. At the very worst, they'll just say that, well, you guys should have tied the knot officially. Then, other things could have followed, and, society would really step up to try and keep you guys together sometimes, if not try to pull you apart with social media and shit. Although that's sort of besides the point. But with that said, when you kind of think about it, it's just easier to cohabit. It's just easier to tell a babe to move into your place, to give them the keys to your place. It's honestly such a child's play type move, as opposed to going down on one knee, metaphorically speaking, and saying that I want to share the rest of my life with you, and I am willing to bet 50% of whatever it is that I have, or at least everything that's in my name, that we're going to make it work. Can you think about the weight of those two decisions like that? And I know there's someone who's gonna be like, oh, back in your father or your grandfather's days, marriage was a hell of a lot easier. People were getting married a lot faster. What happened with you guys? You guys are definitely scared. And then, well, it's not exactly how you think it was. Of course, yes, they could get married pretty quickly and they could stay together. But one, there was polygamy. Two, people didn't have a bunch of IG showing them a bunch of ass that would make them a little bit more aroused and want to bang the next person. Three, morality in society back then did not allow for as much, or at least as rampant and as public ideas on infidelity and shit. But even then, even though I was to discount all of that, when you kind of think about it, even for the women, back in the day, women were trying to have multiple kids. Women could say that they wanted 4, 5, 6 kids and they'd be happy about it and they were okay. But look at it right now, most women don't want to have more than 1 or 2 kids. Yes, there are some that will say that they want 4 kids, 5 kids, more, blah, blah, blah. But for the most part, most women, after tasting a bunch of adulting hell, some of them don't even want kids at all. And you ask, is it that you don't want the responsibility? And they're like, yo, I don't mind taking care of my friends' kids or my relatives' kids, but the responsibility of being a parent is huge. Well, yeah. Even for us guys getting married, the responsibility of that is huge. When you're being an uncle or an auntie, you're basically like a pseudo parent that gets to have most of the fun or can have the kids for a limited amount of time, such that if anything goes wrong, you can just take them back to the parents. If the kids get too sick, you can take them to the hospital, but essentially the responsibility goes back to the parent. When it comes to growing up, a lot of that shit, it falls back to the parent. Paying school fees, buying baby formula, all of that shit falls back to the parent. And it's basically the same thing with us guys getting a babe to move in with us as opposed to getting married. You get to kind of act pseudo married in a certain sense, in that you guys will live together, you guys will be intimate together, and you kind of will be trying to do some element of life together. But essentially the lack of that full-on commitment, that full-on taking up of responsibility, is the thing that in some ways protects you, but also on top of that gives you an easy out, such that if stuff doesn't work out, you're not losing half your shit as a guy. If stuff doesn't work out with a babe, she can just leave, or the guy can just leave, depending on who moved in with who, and that doesn't have to be that much in the name of cost, just in case stuff doesn't work out. So yes, as far as very long explanations go, the main reason why we will choose to cohabit with a woman or have a babe stay with us, as opposed to marrying them at that point in time is because it's just simpler to do. It doesn't carry as much responsibility. And yes, in as much as it might seem like we fear responsibility, it's not really about fear much as it is about the weight of it that we just don't feel like we're ready to take up at that time. Although, then again, I might be wrong about that, just the same I could be wrong about a bunch of other things, so I'm going to leave it at that and move it on to our main topic of this episode. Now, I don't know, maybe it's just my algorithm online, but for some reason, I seem to be stumbling on quite a number of posts, quite a number of videos, articles, and so on, where people are justifying their infidelity. Like they're talking about why they cheated, and for some reason it seems to look like they're trying to justify what they did, and in some ways almost kind of seek sympathy for it. Now, I'm not even gonna lie, in all of these cases, the people that I am seeing post this up a lot are women, which does start to get me to a point where I'm wondering, is everything okay with women today? I don't know, is it just a me thing? Is it the whole victim card that they have become so drawn to that they want to really milk to the absolute end? Because what the fuck kind of shit is this? And I don't know, maybe it's just a me thing. But the number of posts that I've seen where women are justifying that infidelity is actually becoming a little bit concerning, because there's a lot of people that see these posts and they end up commenting on it. And you have to think about it, assuming that let's say 1 in 5 people will comment on that video, it's like tens of thousands of people that are busy watching these videos and either are resonating or are wondering what the hell is up, or are just scrolling and they're like, okay, kind of makes sense to some degree. And I don't know, for me it just really irks me, just mainly because when I do this podcast, whenever I'm having these discussions, I don't endorse infidelity, I don't endorse cheating, even though people can talk about all manner of things, whether it's men are supposed to be polygamous, blah blah, or if he can't do it then I'll find someone else who can. Whatever the justification is, I usually still go on and say that on this podcast especially, I do not endorse infidelity, all right? But the way that some of these people are packaging this shit, it just seems very, very wild. So, for example, there's this post that I saw where a woman had this video where she was talking about how, she ended up meeting one of her exes, I think, that she really had a strong connection with before she met her husband, and they ended up having a thing. And mind you, she was married and she had a kid, a 1-year-old kid, and she ended up getting pregnant by her affair partner. And she goes on to talk about how she fell in love, and when they were doing it and then she found out that she got pregnant, she didn't know what to do because it was such a tough thing for her, because society will ostracize her, because it's the worst thing a woman can ever do, blah blah. But we've never been in her shoes and shit, and I don't have a vagina, so she's probably right. I don't have shoes that are vagina sized, but that's sort of besides the point. And she decided to continue this with a very long caption, which I will read. And she said, and I quote, "No one knew. I carried this in my body while I showed up as a mother, a wife, a daughter, and a friend. I wanted to hold on to that life more than anything. I sat on the floor in the shower inside my dream house in Hawaii as water crashed over me and cried more tears than I knew I had inside. It was time to let it go. There are so many opinions and judgments towards women and what we choose to do with our body. But let me tell you, unless you walked a day in these shoes, you will never understand what it's like to make a decision like this one. I choose to believe the energy that stepped into my soul that day gave me the courage to change the life that was no longer meant for me. As I started to rise from the ashes of all the layers I was shedding, I realized everything that had happened in the past was preparing me for what was to come. The fire inside began to burn brighter and all the pain started turning into purpose. And that purpose is here to give every single woman permission to exist exactly as they are for as long as I possibly can. I love you all. I'm so glad you're here." End quote. And I'm supposed to read shit like this and act like I resonate with what she's going through and the kind of pain that she's had. And yes, I'm not a woman, so I wouldn't understand. But I don't know, you went and you fucked an ex and then you got pregnant by said ex, and then now you're coming back to be like, you know what, everything that I've gone through is supposed to prepare me for my purpose. Like, how the fuck is cheating on your partner supposed to prepare you for your purpose? Like, that shit don't make sense. Not unless if you're trying to become a serial homewrecker. Like, that shit don't make sense. And to think that as you're busy doing all of this, as you're busy writing this down, as you're busy putting it on a video, you actually like trying to speak as though like it was a challenge that you went through and that you've learned and you're better because of said challenge. Like, I don't know. It's like you deciding that you're going to overeat and then you become obese, and then, you know, you kind of have to lose weight, or you're being told that like you have some shit like high blood pressure, and then you come back and you're like, you know what? Me overeating is something that happened to me, and as much as I felt bad about it, you know, it was the challenge that prepared me for my purpose. And you know, I intend on pushing through this purpose in the best way possible. Like, the moment you bring something like that up to people, like, most people will kind of just look at what you're saying, and the first thing they'll ask is, what, like, were you preparing for like an eating competition? Or are you just trying to be the heaviest person on the planet? Not that I have anything against obese people or people with eating disorders or anything, but you know, the example kind of fits. Like, you're doing something that you know you shouldn't be doing, and you know, unlike the people with eating disorders, like, you chose to do it, and now you're trying to use it as a justification. Why again? Like, I'm really trying to see the sense in all this, and at least some others try to like give some sort of a justification, but like trying to turn this shit into an emotional like trip to like use as motivation or like turn into something positive, like, I don't know, maybe it's just me, but that shit's just foul. Like, it's just wrong on so many different levels, and it's a lot worse than some. And you know, like, this is someone who just chose the victim card to its absolute max, and you know, of course they can talk about how, oh, you know, the marriage was bad and everything, blah blah blah, and you know, that could be the case, but like pulling the victim card on such a thing and then trying to explain to like a bunch of strangers on the internet that either is you probably trying to set a precedent for it, or just you trying to express yourself in like the worst way possible. Although fortunately I haven't seen too many of those. I have seen some, but I haven't seen too many of those. Most of what I see are the ones that try to justify it almost in a logical, emotionally aware type of way. Like, for example, this one where someone said, "My truth, why I cheated," and she kind of goes in on the caption and she says, and I quote, "Yes, I cheated. Yes, I regret it. But before you judge me, let me tell you the whole story. When your husband puts everything ahead of your relationship, his drinking, his career, the farm, buying houses, what else are you supposed to do when you've already tried talking 100 times? I beg to be a priority, not above the kids because they come first, but after them. All I wanted was a little time together, a date night once a month, 2 hours to watch a movie, or even just for him to stay up past 7 p.m. so we could talk or hang out. Instead, he'd go to bed early and leave me with the kids' entire bedtime routine. And let me be clear, I don't mind because I'm their mom and I love them, but he'd be up at 3 a.m. to hit the gym and handle the farm, then straight to work by 6 a.m., leaving me to do it all. Wake the kids, dress them, make breakfast, pack lunches, get them to school, and the babysitter work 30 hours a week to help keep us afloat, then come home to clean the house, cook dinner, serve it by 5:15, clean up and do it all again the next day. I tried to keep everything together, but all I wanted was a little attention and affection. I wanted him to see me, to love me in the small ways that reminded me I mattered to him. But when I asked for those things, he said I was asking too much. So yes, I cheated, and it wasn't right. It never is. But I had my reasons, and I was drowning in a marriage where I felt like a ghost. It doesn't excuse my actions, but it explains them. This post isn't for my sympathy. This post isn't for sympathy. It's not for excuses. It's just my truth. End quote. And at least this one almost kind of makes it seem as though she explains things, but she acknowledges that she was wrong, which is a little more on the good side. But still, at the end of the day, the truth of it is you cheated, and yes, you could justify why you did it, but there's other ways to handle things. And I know, this is me speaking from an ideological point of view. And before you think that I'm gonna be on a high horse busy talking about how, oh, you could have done things a little bit better, blah blah blah, like, I'm not gonna do that. Actually, first off, I'm going to start by saying that I can understand exactly where she's coming from, both from a guy's side and to a small degree from the women's perspective in an almost sympathetic manner. Not that I endorse what she did, but rather that I can understand what would make someone want to cheat on their partner when they get to that level, because essentially what she's talking about was emotional neglect. And more than anything, I can get how that can actually break a very good relationship or a seemingly good relationship apart. Because in as much as yes, you can be a good parent and you can be a good employee and a good professional, being a good partner is also something that requires work. The unfortunate reality is that there are a lot of people in relationships that assume that because you're in the relationship, it's automatically okay, and provided you're not fighting or trying to break each other apart, that everything is okay. And yet that's not always the case. Sometimes there's people that are in that relationship and they feel like they're alone in it, that they're not a priority, and that their partner doesn't care for them and is always willing to put them aside in the event that something else comes up. And it can be very, very painful and very lonely on an emotional level. So I can get why when someone else comes and they offer to fulfill your emotional needs to that extent, then it almost feels like a no-brainer for some people to just switch over and go there. And the moment that starts, it moves from the emotional cheating and then it just gets into the physical. And by the time it gets to the physical, it's already like blown past proportions and shit. And that's a very tough situation to be in. And the moment you get caught, it just becomes this nigh irreparable damage for the relationship, the marriage or some shit like that. Of which, considering that I have been talking about marriage, shit, I even forgot to give the disclaimer. Of which, as usual, my disclaimer is particularly simple and it goes like this. As I am not married, neither have I ever been married before, anything that I say in regards to marriage should be considered speculative at best and should be taken with a tablespoon of salt and a dash of aromat. And with that said, I think I can continue. So as I was saying, now you as a woman have gone through all of that and you found this emotional support of a person and you ended up getting so close to them that they slid right between you and your bond with your husband and your legs as well into your vagina, and that's a very tough situation. Except that when you start to look at some of the details, you start to realize that this is basically you wanting to have your cake and eat it. You had an opportunity to leave man's because you realized that he wasn't catering to your emotional needs, but you realized that the guy provides a bunch of other things and you wouldn't want to lose that, and just about anything else that comes with the idea or the fact that the two of you are married, just to be with that guy that caters to your emotional needs. So what do? You decide to fill in every single set of needs that you have, including emotional, and hope that it can stay together the entire time. But then you got caught, or it was eventually found out, and unfortunately now you have to deal with the reality that you fucked up. You thought that you could have your cake and eat it, and that just wasn't really the case. And it's sad that a family's been broken because you wanted to go in and have someone cater to your emotional needs, and you were willing to risk your marriage and your family to get it. And it just seemed so good in the moment, because that momentary feeling of goodness heavily overpowers the long-term consequences that it could come with. And in as much as that is something that people could sometimes sympathize in bits of context wise when you kind of think about it, the reality of it is it was still a fucked up decision. No matter how much you want to try and sugarcoat it and give interesting background music to it to make it seem more emotional than it is, it's not a good situation. Yes, you could justify why you did what you did, but if it's something bad that was done, it's something bad that was done. The unfortunate reality is that when it comes to guys, we don't get that sort of leeway. We could go and try and talk about how, the relationship was so bad and I was trying to work things out and she didn't want to listen to me. And then, those there was my colleague, there was the secretary, or there was the house help who seemed to care for me so much, or there was this female friend, blah blah. And most people will just care about the fact that I was caught banging another woman, not my wife. I will not be given a chance to justify myself. It'll just be said, I cheated on my partner and I fucked up. And I think to some degree, women should be held to that same standard. No coming here to justify what the fuck you did. Like, nah, you fucked up, admit that you fucked up. You can say what happened, but at the end of the day, you admit that you fucked up and you say that you are going to live with the consequences of that fuck up. Whether it is you guys going for counseling and trying to repair things, whether it's you guys ending things, you have to live with the consequences of that fuck up. There's no trying to sugarcoat this. And if you really want to try and justify it, I would advise that you do the thing that a lot of people in the comment sections were busy doing, which was telling the people that were busy writing these posts to just go buy a diary or a journal and write that down so that you can read it and tell yourself that, you know what, I was the one that was hurt here. I was the one that was hurting. I was the victim here. I was not the perpetrator. And to kind of conclude things, I just want to say that I understand. I understand, but you had a choice and you chose to cheat. And you could have left, but you chose to cheat. While we understand you being driven there and you being influenced to cheat, at the end of the day, the problem is cheating, and the problem is that you cheated, and that needs to be acknowledged instead of you trying to justify the fact that you cheated. You can use that when you're trying to explain it to your friends, but stop trying to explain it to the rest of society and the internet. Otherwise, if we start allowing shit like this to happen, we will start saying that there is an acceptable reason for infidelity, which now starts to break the fabric that keeps a lot of relationships alive. And, you know, at the end of the day, I still don't endorse infidelity. But, you know, then again, I haven't been married, so I might be wrong. Although with that said, I do want to give a little bit of advice to the homies, or, you know, just basic information, if anything, and tell you guys that, you know what, just be as good of a partner as you can be to your person. Whether you are being a good husband, whether you are being a good parent, whether you are being a good father, whether you're being a good boyfriend, be the best of that to your partner and to the people around you, such that in the unlikely, and I hope it never happens, situation that could actually become a thing, which is your partner cheating, they do not have any of these justifications to protect them, because you have done your absolute best as a spouse, as a partner, to actually make them happy. And if that wasn't enough for them, then there's nothing for them to blame you for. And, you know, kind of kills a shit ton of that victimization that some women tend to have. Although, then again, maybe I shouldn't be saying anything like this. Maybe I shouldn't be speaking on people who are cheating on married couples. You know, maybe I have zero understanding because I am not married. Either way, I want your thoughts on this. The DMs are open. On IG, it is at the Breaktime_podcast. On Facebook, it is at the Breaktime Podcast. On X, it is at Bagaka the D. And on Bluesky, it is at the breaktimepod.bsky.social. Thank you so much for listening all the way till the end, and I will catch you guys on the next break.
But what I believe is that if you put a pastor and a prostitute in one room, one is likely to convert the other.